I'm sorry.
Here.
And then I'm also going to call roll for our commission member alternates. Member Benitez appears to be absent. Commissioner Donor.
Here.
Commissioner Krafka.
Here.
Commissioner Kuhn. Absent. And Commissioner Slaughter.
Here.
Okay. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please stand and join me in the flag salute. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 4 is public comments. It's at this time that members of the public may call in or speak to items that are not on the agenda. You have 5 minutes to do so. You may call the phone number 916-774-5353. And is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment? We'll give a couple of minutes for someone to call in. There is a slight delay on YouTube versus the actual live meeting. It appears that we have no phone calls. The next item is our oath of office, and all of you have a blue envelope in front of you. And the very first item clipped to the front of that blue folder is your oath of office. To make it easier, I think I'm going to stand, well, I'll stand right here, but we're going to stand up and we're going to raise our right hand. You're going to repeat after me, and at the very end, I ask a question and you answer with "I will." Okay? So if you please stand and raise your right hand. I state your name. Solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
and
the Constitution of the United States,
Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
and I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and I take this obligation freely,
and I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion.
or purpose of evasion.
Do is on your oath, which is that piece of paper clipped to the front of the blue folder, you're going to fill out the bottom right-hand portion with your name and address. And then you will, if you'll hand those to your left until they make their way over to me, the lower left portion is for my office to fill out. So thank you. That brings us to item 6.1, which are the minutes of the previous meetings that occurred on April 19th and May 10th. Is there anyone that wishes to make any amendments or any comments in regards to those minutes? Seeing none, we'll give a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, that is, for someone to call in case they have any amendments or inquiries. seeing that there are no phone calls, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from the April 19th and the May 10th meetings?
I move to accept the minutes.
Second.
Perfect. And may I have a roll call of, let's see, Commissioner, sorry, I'm used to council members. Commissioner Borowak,
Aye.
Commissioner Cuthbertson,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank,
Aye.
Commissioner Griffith,
Aye.
Commissioner Ludwig,
Aye.
Commissioner McPhail,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe,
Aye.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Aye.
Commissioner Wegener,
Aye.
Commissioner Waldrop,
Aye.
Commissioner Willoughby. All right, this brings us to item 6.2, at which point I'm going to turn this over to our Senior Deputy City Attorney, Joe Mandel.
Good evening, everyone. As Helen said, my name is Joe Mandel. I'm with the Roseville City Attorney's Office. And the next item on our agenda is we are going to select a chair and a vice chair to be the presiding officer at these meetings of the Independent Redistricting Commission. So for a little bit of background for those who may be watching and getting into these meetings for the first time, the Independent Redistricting Commission was established in November of 2020 following the general municipal election where voters approved the formation of this independent body to redraw the city council district maps. So the commission is comprised of the 11 commission members up here and then the 5 non-voting alternates down here that were seated at the April 19th and May 10th meetings. So moving forward, to ensure that these meetings are conducted in an efficient and productive manner, we're recommending that you select one of the 11 commissioners to serve as the chair and be the presiding officer, and then we'll also select a vice chair who will act in the chair's absence. So to clarify, any of the 11 commissioners can serve as chair. The non-voting alternates are not eligible, but they're able to nominate, discuss, deliberate. You can be totally involved in all of this discussion. The only thing you can't be is chair, vice chair, or vote. But any of the 11 of you are eligible for chair and vice chair. Before we get to nominations and voting, I want to talk about some of the roles and responsibilities of what that chair position is. The chair will be the presiding officer at all the official meetings of the Independent Redistricting Commission. You need to attend all the meetings. You will call the meetings to order, propose adjournment, decide all questions of order without debate, call for discussion and votes on proposals, clarify or request that clarifications be made, rule out of order, interpret and enforce meeting procedures, call members to order if they disregard rules or procedures, and ensure that meetings are conducted in an efficient and productive manner in conjunction with me, Helen, and Sonia as the meeting liaisons. And so in the absence of the chair, the vice chair will take on all those responsibilities until the chair is present. So that's the duties and responsibilities of the chair. So the process of how we're going to do the selection to hopefully make this go as smoothly as possible. I'm first going to ask for anyone to express their interest, and if you have an interest in becoming chair. And so we'll handle the whole chair first and then select the chair and then move on to the vice chair position. So it's not, top vote getter becomes chair and second becomes vice chair. We're going to do them both separately. So when I ask for interest, those that are interested in being the chair can explain why they are interested in becoming chair. And again, any of the 11 of you are welcome to be chair. After we hear from all of those that are interested in being the chair, I will ask for nominations for chair. Self-nominations are all okay, and nominations by the non-voting alternates are all okay as well. They just can't vote. So again, you can nominate yourself. Anybody can nominate you. We will then ask for public comment on those nominations before we go to a vote. And then what we'll do is after we have all the nominees, we'll do a roll call vote and ask each of the 11 commissioners which nominee they want to vote for. No ballots, no fancy black bag that we're picking out of this time. You're going to say the commissioner that you are choosing to become the chair. So Sonia will help me do that roll call vote and tabulate everything. If there happens to be a tie, we'll take the 2, 3, whoever tied vote getters and move them on and just do a tiebreaker. And after the voting is then done, what I'll do is I'll ask for a motion from the commission to appoint that top vote getter as the chair. We'll get a second for that motion. We'll all vote on that motion, and then we'll sort of do the same exact procedure for the vice chair process, which is, anybody have interest, then we'll do nominations, public comment, roll call vote, and then motion to appoint. So all of that as background before we start. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide clarifications, or if anybody has anything that they want to talk about before I ask for anybody who's interested in chair. Seeing none, is anyone interested in being the chair of the Independent Redistricting Commission?
I'll put my name forward.
Okay. Okay.
What's your name? I can't read from that far away.
Renee Borowiak.
Thank you.
Is anyone else interested in being the chair of this commission?
Can we make requests of people or ask if they're willing?
Sure, certainly.
Yeah, I was interested in nominating Paul Frank, and I'd love to hear if that's something you're interested in.
I would be interested.
Brian, I'm wondering if you might be interested.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be interested. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm also wondering if Jeff would be interested.
It's getting to be a pretty crowded field. 11 people running for one spot.
Okay, so we have 4 so far that have expressed an interest. This is kind of expressing an interest, so I think we'll move forward, and I would imagine that nominations as well, if we're expressing interest, either as a self-nomination or somebody nominating, we have the 4.
We have Renee, Paul, Brian, and Jefferson.
Okay.
I don't know if Jeff agreed. I don't think he did. I think that was a polite no. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll leave myself in. That's fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
So then we have 4 in the running. Are there any other that are interested, or are there any other nominations? Okay, so we have all 4. What I'm going to be asking for, we're going to do a roll call vote, and I'm going to ask for you to vote for one of these 4 to be the chair. Actually, Sonia, you can do it, because that's what we're going to move forward with. So roll call vote, and here we go. Oh, yeah.
Can the 4 people tell us,
yes, I'm
maybe
sorry.
something about themselves?
That's a great
Yes,
idea.
absolutely. And I meant to take public comment, so let's not go to a vote yet. Thank you for stopping me.
You go first if you like.
We can start, yeah, please.
My name is Paul Frank, and I've served as chair of several different citywide commissions, including Transportation Commission and Parks and Recreation Commission. I was also the former president a long time ago of the Roseville Coalition of Neighborhood Associations, and have experience running meetings in that capacity as well.
And don't forget the Charter Review Commission.
And I was on the Charter Review Commission, and I'm familiar with Robert's Rules of Order.
Excellent.
Brian Ludwig. I'm the president of the West Park Neighborhood Association. And most of my board experience is in Lincoln, which is where my office is. I'm the president of the Rotary Club of Lincoln, president of Semper Fi Association, the treasurer of Semper Fi Association, and treasurer of the Lincoln Veterans Memorial Coalition.
I'm Jefferson Willoughby. I've also served on several in several capacities, I should say. Many years on the Grants Advisory Commission. I served as a school board member here in town, and also serve on the School Board Foundation.
I'm Renee Borowiak, and I work for the school district for the superintendent and attend every single board meeting. So I'm really familiar with how board meetings work just from the other side, and as well as support our foundation.
Excellent. Before we move forward with the roll call vote, I'm going to ask if there's anybody from the public that has any comments or questions and wants to call in. Again, the number is 916-774-5353, and we'll wait a few seconds for the delay. This will give you time to think of your vote as well. Okay, seeing no phone calls, we're going to go forward and do a roll call vote. So what you're doing is you are voting for the commissioner that you are recommending for chair. So you
Okay,
wanna go.
I'll start with Renee.
I'm actually going to vote for Commissioner Frank.
Okay. And Commissioner Willoughby.
I'll also vote for Commissioner Frank.
All right. Commissioner Frank.
I'll vote for myself.
Okay. Commissioner Griffith.
Going to vote for Renee.
All right. Commissioner Ludwig.
Commissioner Renee.
All right. Commissioner McPhail.
I'm going to vote for Brian Ludwig.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Commissioner Ludwig.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Commissioner Frank.
Commissioner Wagner.
Commissioner Frank.
Commissioner Waldrop.
Commissioner Renee.
And Commissioner Willoughby.
I think you voted.
Yeah.
Call you? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, Holly.
Commissioner Frank.
Okay. So we have 6 votes for Commissioner Frank being the most votes. We have 4 for Renee and 3 for Brian Ludwig. So may I have a motion to appoint Paul Frank as the chair of the Independent Redistricting Commission?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. Roll call. Commissioner Borovac.
Aye.
Commissioner Cuthbertson.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank.
Aye.
Commissioner Griffith.
Aye.
Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
Commissioner McPhail.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Aye.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Aye.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Waldrop.
Aye.
And Commissioner Willoughby.
Aye.
Excellent. Congratulations, Commissioner Frank. We're not going to move tonight, but normally we will have the chair sit in the middle, but we're not going to try to shuffle that up for tonight. So congratulations. So that was for selection of chair. We'll move on and do the same exact process for the selection of vice chair. So I would like to ask if anyone would like to express their interest in being vice chair. And again, we can do self-nominations. The same people that were interested in chair can also be interested in vice chair, and anybody can nominate from down here as well.
I'd like to nominate Renee.
Do it.
I'd like to nominate Renee.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Okay. Before we go for a vote on vice chair, I'd like to ask if there's any members of the public that would like to call in and comment at all. 916-774-5353. Seeing no phone calls, we're going to move forward with a roll call vote, and I believe we have just
Do we need a motion first?
no motion yet.
Ah,
After we do the votes, we'll then go for a motion. So, I believe just the one, right?
It's Renee,
Yes.
yes. So may I have a motion to appoint Renee, please help me with your last name, Boroviak, as the vice chair of the commission. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Commissioner Boroviak.
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Cuthbertson.
Oh, am I saying aye? Aye.
Commissioner Frank.
Aye.
Commissioner Griffith. Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
Commissioner McPhail.
aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Aye.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Aye.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Waldrop,
Aye.
and Commissioner Willoughby.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the both of you. So the next order of business, if you're comfortable, Paul, kind of running the meeting from here, the next order of business will be to move on to item 6.3, which is the selection of the demographer. And Sonia will go ahead and get that started for us.
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, my name is Sonia Orozco. I am the City Clerk. This evening, you'll be making an important decision in selecting a demographer to partner with the Commission for the redistricting process. As you are aware, 3 professional consultants responded to the City's request for proposal for demography and mapping services. By way of background, the U.S. decennial census data is not yet complete. I'm going to give you some dates and some general background on when we expect those numbers to come in. So by August 16th of 2021, the state or the federal census says that states will receive the data they need to begin redistricting in August. That's states, not local municipalities or counties. The Census Bureau will also share this information with the public. However, the data will be in a format that requires additional handling and software to extract familiar tables. COVID-19 related delays in prioritizing the delivery of the apportionment results delayed the original redistricting data delivery plan. It was supposed to be to us by March of this year. By September 30th, the Census Bureau will deliver the final redistricting data toolkit to all states and the public again. This will include digital tools which provide access to an integrated software browsing tool for official recipients, as well as access to the online Data Explorer tool for both official recipients and the public. This information will assist the demographer as they work to implement the data in draft maps for your consideration. Tonight, you'll have the opportunity to ask each demographer respondents questions via individual team meetings. This evening, we'll start with NDC. We'll move to Bear Demographics and then Flow Analytics will also be available. In your packet, you did have a evaluation tool. I would suggest that you hold that onto that until after the interviews because that may change or sway how you rate these particular individuals. So at this time, Brian, are we ready for NDC? No? So we have about 5 minutes. Are there any general questions?
Yeah, I'd like to open it up to commissioners if you have any questions regarding the process. And just to kind of give you an idea of what I was planning on doing, after staff background, commissioners ask questions, presentations, and then open it up to public comment, commissioner discussion, and then selection.
I think that we should probably hold public comment after the presentations by the demographers.
That's what I have.
Okay, very good.
Got a question. Does the city have a budget?
Yes.
For the.
Yes, we do. It's $150,000.
Okay,
Now, part of that budget will pay for the professional consultants. We need to hold money aside in case we are sued on our map. And we also have money for audio-visual when we move off-site to have our public hearings within each district.
A general ballpark was helpful.
Are there in-house translation services that we plan on using? It looked like they were specifically excluded from.
We do have in-house translation. We also contract with a firm that offers translation services. So depending on whether or not staff is available, we do have a firm that we have lined up for Spanish translations. Depending on how the census data comes in, we may have to have a third language, whether that be Russian or Tagalog. So right now, we're just planning on Spanish.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Just so we know kind of how our ranking is supposed to work, can we review what's going to be collected at the end? And, just so we know if people are taking notes, you'll know.
The overall score for each one of the 3 would be helpful. If you feel uncomfortable putting your name on that, you don't have to put your name on that. It's just we're collecting these in case there is a Public Information Act request for how the commission or how the demographers were scored. And again, hold it off till the end because depending on what the demographers say to you and answer your questions, it may change your ranking.
And to follow up on that, in the RFP itself, we said that we would prepare a master average score sheet showing those figures, and you'll note the different weightings of the various items of what should carry more weight than others. But yeah, all of the comments, all of the handwriting notes, all of those things are going to be collected by us, and we prepare the master average score sheet, and then that score sheet is what is available to the public in the event there is a public records request.
And so is the demographer selected based on the highest average score? Or like, is it a problem if there's a disconnect in terms of them requesting that information afterwards, that they scored higher, but if we vote for a different one?
No, it's the will of the commission. I mean, you can have a very high score, but depending on the look and feel of the demographer and whether you're comfortable with them can also influence your vote or your ranking.
The rankings are kind of your initial impression and evaluation based on the written materials. We've asked them all to come and present and answer questions that you may have tonight. That's where we're sort of waiting for, to be able to have them call in via Microsoft Teams. And, you know, you can ask any clarifying questions you may have. But yeah, the selection at the end is whichever demographer that the commission chooses.
We've also provided you a proposal at a glance, which was difficult for us to put together because some demographers priced out per meeting.
Is the city looking to the consultant to do that, or is that something that us and the city will lead? Because I know some, it looked like some proposals included it, others didn't, so I just wasn't sure what the request was.
The request is for the demographer to at least attend one meeting for a pretty full training on the requirements to redistrict, and then also 5 public hearings. You probably read in at least one of the demographers' proposals that they plan on attending 10 meetings. Well, based on our projected schedule, we won't have 10 meetings before we finally have to have the public hearings. So if we move all the way through December and we have our draft maps available, I then have to publish that draft map. And within 30 days of that draft map being published, we have to have 5 public hearings. Tentatively, those are scheduled for January, and there's a week of meetings every night. And that will enable us to adopt our map by February 1st. Those dates have to be vetted through the demographer to make sure that they can make these dates, because what's happening in California is that 482 cities are, moving either to districts initially or are now redistricting. So demographers are busy, extremely busy. So again, I hope we can meet our schedule. Just as a point of reference, we'll meet again in July. We'll go silent in August. Because we won't have any data then. And most of the training will probably happen in September by the demographer. We'll have our figures in October. We'll start drawing the draft maps. Some of those meetings I think we're going to hold off-site, just based so we can get out in the community. Some of the demographer proposals have a lot of outreach in them. The ones that don't, staff will handle that through our public affairs office. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
One question I have is, were any of these that we're seeing tonight involved in the districting process prior to this?
Yes, NDC.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
But remember, it wasn't NDC. They processed many, many maps for consideration, not just the map that was adopted.
Given that many cities are going through this process and the demographers are very busy, they're committed, though, if they're chosen, to take it.
Yeah. And I've been searching different cities that are going through the redistricting process. Many of them are very late in selecting the demographer. They're waiting and holding different hearings throughout the community about, give me your impression on your communities of interest. And they're collecting that data. And just now starting with their RFPs for demographers. So I think we're in a good position to pick a demographer who will be firm on our schedule.
Good to know.
That was one of the things that I noticed when I was looking through the proposals, was that 2 were like back 3 months, And inside of the RFP, it said that the deadline was February 1st. It says it twice at the very beginning, and I'm like, why is it there if it's not in the proposal?
Well,
That moved
the
like-
difference with that is the state allows cities to adopt their map in April. But because of our fundraising period, we can't have candidates not know which district that they're fundraising for. And they, by ordinance, can legally start fundraising on February 8th. If we don't have a map adopted till April, it muddies the water as far as candidacy and fundraising.
And that's a Placer County deadline, the campaign.
That's the City of Roseville
City of
deadline.
Roseville. Okay,
As long
thank
as
you.
we get our final map all sealed and signed, sealed, and delivered by April, we're safe. So by having it done by February, that's money for the county. They'll be happy about that. Because it does take a lot of staff time county-wise to make sure that the lines are drawn correctly and the voters within each district are accounted for. I'm looking at Brian.
We've only been able to connect with them through audio, and I'm trying to get them on video as well.
Okay.
Just give me one more second.
Okay.
Are there any questions from the alternate commissioners also?
I do have a question. If we end up doing a lot of the outreach through our own Roseville resources, are we taking that into consideration with the budget as well?
Yes, because we have dedicated staff that are employed by the city, our Public Affairs and Communications Department.
So that would not be part of the overall budget?
Correct. Unless I hear otherwise. But right now, the answer is correct.
How much time does each demographer have for their
We've
presentations?
told them 10, but we've allocated 15 for each one of them. And if we're having video problems right now, I hope we don't have video problems with all three of them. But we do have the audio capability, so.
Just audio, but you've got it.
Okay.
Just talk.
Hi, Doug. This is Sonia. How are you?
There, can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you. Thank you, Dr. Douglas Johnson. This is Sonia, the Roseville City Clerk. We have the commission here before us. If you just take a brief moment and introduce yourself, then stand for questions afterwards.
Okay, just to confirm, is my understanding correct, the Teams is not working?
Correct.
It would be nice to be able to see you all, but rather than just speak audio.
No, Teams is not working right now.
No. Okay. Well, my name is Doug Johnson. I'm president of National Demographics. I have been working full-time on local government redistricting since 2001, and the company has actually been focused on local government redistricting for counties, cities, school districts, and special districts since 1979. It's been our pleasure to work with all kinds of local governments all over California and Arizona as well. And we recently did a count. Since 2001, we have completed 368 local government redistricting projects. And we're proud to say that not one of those has been overturned by a court or the Department of Justice. So we're very proud of that record of success. It was our pleasure, as you probably know, to work with the city before. Obviously, we work very hard to execute the goals of our clients. So we are the technical process and data experts in this process. We are not the decision makers. We leave that up to the jurisdiction, in your case, this independent commission. And we look forward to working with you on this. I'll keep this brief since I know we're running somewhat behind. But we are completely nonpartisan. We don't do any work for partisan entities. And proud to say, looking at the bidders here, we are rare in that. And you're only bidder that does that, that does make that pledge. And we are completely focused on local governments and independent efforts. So we are doing the county of Sacramento and about 6 other counties across the state and numerous cities and school districts, and we hope to have the opportunity to work with you. So with that, I will wrap it up and happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. If you want to start, or if anyone would like to just begin with a question.
I'll start. I'm just a little bit confused in terms of the schedule that was in your proposal. There was kind of a generic summary scope of work with a timeline and then more of a detailed timeline. But I think it just boils down to, does the February 1st, 2022 date for map adoption, does that fit within your proposed timeline?
Yes, we can certainly make that work. We have a number of jurisdictions whose deadlines are actually December 15th. That's the deadline for the counties and for cities that have June elections. So we've got everyone kind of scaled up by when their different type of jurisdiction is and when their deadline is. We can certainly fit your commission in to get it done by February 1st.
Thank you.
I had a question. Can you speak a little bit to your education and training components? And I know that your organization was part of the initial districting, and I'd love to know if that initial training covered some of the problematic designs like packing and cracking, and what we can expect to be covered in our trainings with you.
Sure, yes. We take a lot of pride in 2 parts of this. Number one is our experience and success at engaging the community to participate in this process. And the other part of it is, of course, our unique set of tools to empower folks once they are part of the process. So there is a lot of effort needed, obviously, to engage the community in this process. Redistricting is kind of an esoteric issue. It's not, safety on your streets or is your street paved. It's a kind of a couple steps removed from everybody's daily lives. So it does take some work to get the community engaged. So we work with you on getting that message out and working with your local community to engage those folks and get them involved, especially those who traditionally may not have been all that involved in city issues. And that's part of the big goal of the Independent Commission.
Yeah. So
once we have it, then we get into the education details that you're talking about. And this is where we give the full rundown on all the rules. There are federal requirements for equal population, following the Federal Voting Rights Act, and then avoiding racial gerrymandering. And now this time around, we have this new set of laws, the Fair Maps Act, which is just kicked in January 1st of 2020. And so this is a fairly strict criteria how lines are drawn. And then if maps are fairly balanced on all those statutory criteria, then there are traditional redistricting principles. As someone's expecting to vote in 2022, we want to minimize the number of them who are moved to 2024 seats and see their vote delayed. So those are more traditional criteria that kick in at the end. So we walk all our jurisdictions through that process. With commissions, we do it even more in depth because we also want to get the public engaged in that. And we will walk you through all that and then put out the tools that empower people to take that knowledge and draw maps and draw neighborhoods. So we've got paper maps for the folks that either don't have good internet access or just prefer not to use a computer. We've got the simple District R tool that we enhanced with a whole bunch of demographic data. So people get all the data in there, but have a really easy way to just paintbrush on the screen, draw their neighborhood. And then for those that really want to get the power tools get into the Caliper Maps.online redistricting, and they have all the data and all the tools that we have on our desktop software. And so we, of course, train people on all those things too. So that's really what we love about this work, is engaging the community and educating them and then seeing them thrive. And I would say, our goal is that we won't draw your map. We're hoping that we empower you and the residents sufficiently that you actually end up choosing a resident-drawn map, even over one that we might suggest.
Thank you for all of that information, but one quick follow-up. The reason I was asking about this is because during the districting process, one of the criterion that we are looking at so heavily in this process is experience, and I think there's no better experience to look at than the one we just had with your team. And so when I connected with council members about their understanding of the maps and which ones to choose, there seemed to be some misunderstanding about what was compact, contiguous, and, it, to me, didn't seem as if the training was sufficient. And so I wanted to understand if what the training that you provided our city was this previous time, and if that's the same training we can expect for our commission, because I know I want to be prepared.
Right, of course. The key thing to remember is that the Fair Maps Act didn't exist back when the city went through this process. So compactness, communities of interest, all those kind of good government principles were completely at the council's discretion. So the law was very different back then. And so, as you know, that map and an even more controversial map down the road in Martinez fully withstood legal scrutiny because they were legal, because they complied with the law at the time. So the weird thing back then was, prior to the Fair Maps Act, compactness, communities of interest, things like that were good government goals, but they weren't statutory requirements. So we advised them, they were fully advised on all of that. Now, of course, you're in an entirely different boat. Now you have state statutes that lay out contiguity, communities of interest in neighborhoods, easily recognized boundaries, and compactness. So you'll be getting a very different training because your legal environment is completely different than what was back then. And that's our goal, is to make sure that every map meets the legal requirements that apply to that jurisdiction. And then we don't tell the jurisdiction what to do. Within the legal, what's allowed legally, we leave the decisions up to the local decision makers.
I have a question.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Kind of related to that. So during the last map selection, and also I looked in the Common Cause material that was provided by the city, and one of the bullet points in there, it was, compactness, yada, 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 and then at the bottom it says protection of incumbency. So I guess my question is, does the Fair Maps Act prohibit that? See, I haven't been trained yet. I tried to read up on it, but I couldn't find it anywhere.
Well, it's a great question, because the reason you can find it is it's not mentioned. So the Fair Maps Act is unusual. It has a set of criteria that you have to follow, the ones I just cited.
Okay.
And then it has a prohibition on, you cannot consider political data. You cannot favor or discriminate on the basis of political data. The law is actually silent on whether you can or cannot consider where incumbents live or challengers. It does mention it in one place. In communities of interest, you cannot define a community of interest because we live near council member X and we want to stay near council member X. You can't do that. But otherwise, it's silent. So that leaves it up to you, the commission, to say, if you have two maps that completely are even on all the statutory requirements, then you could consider it if you wish to. But that's entirely at your choice. And then that's for under the Fair Maps Act. You're actually under the Independent Commissions Law, which goes one more step and says you cannot. So the reason you can't find a fair map is it's not fair, but because you're an independent commission, a different law that allows independent commission says you cannot consider where they live.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
I have a question also. This is regarding the project pricing on your bid. And under the optional section, it says $20,000 for the caliper-centered system, including these elements, which is maptitude and so on and so forth. So I'm wondering what makes that optional, because it seems to me like the map is the thing. So just if you could speak to that.
Sure. So you're right. The map is the thing. The optional part of this is public-facing tools. So these tools are to allow residents to draw and submit maps. That is something that is at the discretion of the jurisdiction. Obviously, your independent commission, your goal is to get residents to participate and draw maps. So we assume that you would want to do something like this. But that's not required. In many jurisdictions, especially special districts and low-profile jurisdictions, won't put those tools out because there's just not the level of interest. Of course, we have our mapping software on our desktops, and so we would still draw the maps even if these tools weren't included.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the RFP. In the city's request, we asked for a minimum of 3 references, projects similar, and I see a lot of your experience. I see a lot of references and that kind of thing, but I didn't actually find the 3 projects with the references. Am I missing something here, or is there something that you can provide us that would, I didn't see that. Can you help me there?
Well, on page 17 of our proposal, we actually have about, 12 references. So a number of them are independent commissions. They're all types of jurisdictions and approaches. So those are there. That's where we provide that. Of course, I can give you, I can give you 368 references if you want them. So we're happy to provide more if more would be useful to you.
Thank you.
Answer your question? Because you were talking about projects.
Well,
exactly. I mean, just it doesn't seem to meet the RFP in that.
Are these references projects?
Yes. Yeah, these are each individual projects.
And how many of those projects were done after the new law in 2020 that, as you mentioned, changed everything?
Yeah, so in terms of cities and counties, who are the only ones covered by the new law, I think we've done, I don't know off the top of my head, I think 2. But we've completed 12 projects in the COVID era. And I know that number because we talk about that a lot. They were done almost entirely remotely. But most of those were special districts and school districts. I think we've only had 2 cities that finished up in the Fair Maps Act process. One of which, Roanoke Park, over from you, was really thrown from the loop because they were 2/3 of the way through the project when the law suddenly changed on them. So that was if you're familiar with it, it was a fairly chaotic project because they wanted one map and then the law kicked in and changed, and the law hadn't been expected to kick in until 2021. So at the last minute, there's a legislative change that suddenly made it apply to that. And so we guided them through the process of that scramble.
More questions?
I've got a question about the public engagement and outreach and the per meeting expense. I'm a little confused about what's included and what's extra in the bid as far as the outreach and the meeting attendance for the public hearings.
Sure. So, as I suspect you're already thinking about, the number of meetings varies wildly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. We never really know exactly how many meetings are going to be involved. So we just make it easy. We just say, you figure out how many meetings you want, and we charge for each meeting day. If you do 2 meetings in one day, that's just one charge. So that's how you take the basic elements, which are all the data and the demographics, and then drawing of maps and working with the registrar to implement the maps, all the stuff that is required. Add in the per meeting expense for each meeting that you hold, and then whatever optional elements you want to add on to that.
Following on briefly, are those flat rate per meeting charges, or are they per NDC,
Hourly or?
well, if you bring 4 staff members, is it 4 times that amount or just the flat rate?
No. Yeah, no. It's per meeting, regardless of how many NDC folks end up there. So if we're needing to do 2 people attending meetings just to hit the schedule dates that you want, we'll have both of us come whenever possible so that we're both familiar with everything and handing back and forth. But that is entirely on our side. It's just per meeting, flat fee, no matter how many NDC people are there or how long the meeting goes.
Thank you.
Renee, Andrew?
Yeah. If I can just add one thing on the per meeting stuff, the reason we do this is that, I think every jurisdiction goes into this with a thought about how many meetings will be involved, and that number almost always changes. And so where we do, if we do a flat fee, then it becomes like, well, how much is it to add on another meeting, or if they decide not to hold a meeting. So this is just a much simpler way of staying flexible to meet your goals.
I do have a question. Is there a possibility of virtual meetings, and how much would that cost?
Yeah, we love virtual meetings. We've actually found them to be very successful. Every type of meeting has a plus and minus, but we found it brings out a whole audience that would not come in person to meetings, primarily families who have kids at home and can't get childcare and that kind of thing can now participate. So we're big fans. And the price, if we're attending a meeting virtually, it's actually much better for us too, obviously, logistically. So the price is less than half. So if we're in there in person, it's $2,750 per meeting. And if we're there virtually, it's only $1,250 per meeting.
When you say when you're there, do you mean you're running the meeting?
We do offer that where we can manage all the Zoom, but that takes a whole nother staff member. So that's not included in that price. This is more just if we're participating in the meeting virtually.
Any other questions?
I know I've asked so many questions. I have one more. So I know you said that you've done 368 local redistricting and not a single one has been overturned. I'm curious if you have faced challenges in court to some of your maps, or have your cities or jurisdictions had to adapt their maps based on complaints?
Yeah, so of the 368 maps, we went back recently and looked. I think the count was 3 of them were challenged legally. Martinez and Fullerton, the courts fully dismissed the challenge. The map was completely upheld. In Placentia, the map was upheld for the upcoming election. And then the plaintiff group refiled their complaint, and the city adjusted their map after that refiled complaint to get to settle the case. So those of the 368, only 3 have been legally challenged. 2 were upheld. The third, in Placentia, the whole controversy is about one council member who wanted to run again for one more term. So he won his election. So then the city, once he was in his seat for one more term, then the city was happy to change its map after that. So they decided to settle that.
Okay, so it was 3, because I wanted to ask that because page 4, you have a whole section about the firm being criticized by outsiders saying that the map isn't right. And, as an insider that criticized the previous map as not being right, I was curious how often that happens. But, okay, so the paragraph is there for the 3. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to clarify, working with 368 local governments, some of them are going to make controversial decisions. And again, our belief is that you want someone that's going to execute your vision and help you to achieve your goals, not tell you how to do your job and what decisions you should make. So that's our approach to all our projects, is we are there to assist in making a full, accurate, and legal process, but not to dictate to our clients what they should draw.
I have one question. Under optional project elements, it's, let's see, 3C. It says District R without Mappitude or ESRI. It's like, $6,000 versus $20,000. I'm curious if you've had clients that have selected that option, and if so, are there limitations? Like, how is it different from the $20,000 option?
Sure. District R is a very easy to use, simple tool. It's mainly developed to draw your neighborhood kind of thing. So it brings up a map. We've worked with District R. There is a free version, but we worked with them to customize it so that it has demographic data and lots of information, socioeconomic data built into it, both on ethnicity and on things like renters and education levels. So people can look at that data and identify their neighborhood, and then use a simple paintbrush tool to just paint in the census blocks that you identify as your neighborhood or your community. It works great for drawing a small neighborhood. Using a paintbrush to draw a whole district or a whole citywide map of districts gets to be a little tedious and hard to fine tune. So it does work, and you can draw districts using District R, but it's more focused on community tools. So some jurisdictions, yes, definitely are only using District R because it's much less expensive, and they don't think they'll get the level of public engagement or public interest to justify the higher expense. And that's certainly an option. The Caliper Mappitude Online Redistricting tool or more is a much more full-powered, you can draw a circle around an area and pick that whole area. You get a lot more demographic numbers and fine-tuning and things. It's close to everything that we can do on our desktop you can do in that tool. So it's a much more powerful tool.
Can you describe the difference between ESRI and Caliper? It seems like ESRI is potentially much more expensive.
Yes. So the ESRI tool is very user-friendly. Caliper is close to it, but ESRI is definitely got a step up a bit on the user-friendliness. Caliper does have one big advantage of it comes in 6 languages, and ESRI only comes in 1. But ESRI also can pull in much more data. Essentially, if some resident knows GIS and has a data set they want to use, we had one resident want to look at watersheds, and he could pull in ESRI data from other sources into the system. So we mentioned it, we're happy to work with it, but like I mentioned in there, ESRI starts at over $80,000. And so that generally rules it out for most jurisdictions. But we're happy to use it if that's your preference.
And the last time you consulted on the maps, that was using the MOR?
Yes.
Go.
And the public participation kits. District R wasn't around back then, so that was an option. But
any other questions? Seeing none. Douglas, I think given the experience, obviously you have a lot of experience with this, and as I think Julie suggested, experience with the city of Roseville. Can you say, and if there is nothing, you don't have to say anything, but can you say, would there be anything that you do different this time than last time?
Well, yeah, I think the citizens have made their desires clear that they wanted to create an independent commission and take a lot of the factors that drove the math last time out of the calculations this time around. And so we embrace that. And I think, given that you're an independent commission, you will likely have more of a public-facing, public engagement and public empowerment piece to this than happened last time. And that really is our bread and butter, and we love that. I can't tell you how many times our clients kind of nervously ask us, are you going to be insulted or hurt, or do you think there's anything wrong if we adopt Joe's map over NDC's map? And we always respond, no, we love that. That's what we want to see, is that the residents can engage and draw maps that are legal and meet the goals and ultimately are adopted. So I think, yes, obviously we would have, because you are different than the council and you have different rules, we would take a very different approach to making sure you follow the new rules and that you embrace this the spirit that all of you, I think, had when you applied for this commission, to really have a public, open, and transparent process.
All right, thank you very much. And will you be around tonight if there are any further, or that's
Staff can
presentation?
collect questions and forward them if there are questions after.
So Sonia, who is our next presentation from?
Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Dr. Johnson, very much. Our next presentation is from Bear Demographics. The individual that will be representing Bear Demographics is Andrew Westfall.
Ready to go? And this will be by audio as well. Oh.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
Hi. Good evening.
Thank you, Andrew. If you'd like to make your presentation and then be available for any questions from the commission afterwards.
Sure, no, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair. Brian, I don't know if you want to put the presentation up and we can go through it. Great. So we are Bear Demographics and Research. My name is Andrew Westall, and I am the principal and owner of the firm. It's a new firm that I started earlier this year after being in the public sector for over 20 years with a career in the state legislature and also with the city of Los Angeles as a policy expert and a redistricting expert. I have over 24 years of redistricting experience going back to 1997 and have worked on a variety of projects, including the City of Los Angeles' City Council map in 2001-02 and 2011 and 12, the Los Angeles Unified School District map in 2001-02, the State Assembly map in 2001, as well as other jurisdictions and water districts in Southern California. If we can go to the next slide, please. As you can see, I have a project team of different subcontractors. As I mentioned, I have myself, Mr. David Ely, who is a partner of mine and someone who's worked on redistricting since the late 1980s for a variety of jurisdictions, counties, cities, school districts, water districts. I was also the backbone to what's called the statewide database, which is housed at the University of California, Berkeley, which is the mainstay of redistricting and census data that's collected in the state of California really since approximately 1990, and that's the information that the State Commission uses. As you can see in our proposal, we do have some options available to you as well. If the Commission is interested in a full-service outreach option, we partner with a gentleman by the name of Tusok Diazatlan and Diazatlan Consulting, who has over 20 years in outreach work, a lot of that having to do with redistricting and with municipal governments, and is able to provide really a multilingual approach to outreach, once again, if that's something that the Commission desires. And then we also partner with a firm that's based in Sacramento, but also has offices in San Leandro and Long Beach by the name of Olson Remcho. And Olson Remcho really has the top redistricting legal experts in the state of California and really in the western United States, and has done really been at the forefront of a lot of the litigation and very successful litigation with respect to redistricting over the last 30 years. Next slide, please. So as you can see, this is the current city council map for the city of Roseville, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I would highlight down in the left-hand corner some of the numbers there. So as you know, this map was put together and adopted in 2019 by the city council. And based on the 2010 census population at that time, and that was utilized for this map, there's 118,788 people that the map was built on. According to the California Department of Finance's population estimate for 2021, which is the most recent population estimate we have for the city of Roseville, City of Roseville's population is approximately 146,875 people. What that means is that the city of Roseville over the last 10 years has grown over 23% in terms of population. And so, certainly the members of this commission are much more familiar with where that housing has been built in the city of Roseville over that time. But certainly there's been a tremendous amount of growth in the city, and that will affect the outcome of this map, I'm sure, in many ways. One of the other things I would point out with respect to Roseville is I am very familiar with the city of Roseville personally. I have had family that lived in the city of Roseville and over time, although they currently do not. And I would say that when I was a student at UC Davis back in the 1990s, I actually, in the summer of 1995 and 96, actually did a lot of landscape construction in the Sun City neighborhood of the city of Roseville. So I do have a lot of familiarity with the city with respect to its build out over the last 25 years. And although I haven't been to the residential neighborhoods in a lot, I have visited the commercial areas of the city when I've been in town. Next slide, please. So with respect to the timeline, certainly this would shift some more, and I'll get back to that February 1st deadline towards the end of this particular slide. But this year, certainly we'd want to train the commission on the redistricting process and all the legal issues and legal laws that have to be followed during that time. As was pointed out by the city clerk earlier, once that census data does come out in August of this year, we do have the capabilities and the technical capabilities to reformat that data. As the city clerk said, it's called the legacy format, but we do have the ability to format that data for the city of Roseville. The difficulty at that point, though, is that city of Roseville, like any jurisdiction in the state of California that's doing redistricting, also has to wait until the state contractors for the statewide database reallocate the population of the state prison data. There was a law that was passed back in 2011 and was incorporated into the California Fair Maps Act in 2018 and when it was amended in 2019 that requires that the state prison population in the state of California be reallocated back to their place of origin, right, back to where they were before they were incarcerated, and that redistricting has to be based on that data. You should know that at this time, the statewide database is projecting that data will be available at approximately September 23rd of this year, although it's hopeful that it will be closer to Labor Day when they'll actually have that data available. But once that data is available, we put information together on the census data and do a presentation to the commission so you had an understanding of not only the demographics of the city based on the census, but also get a sense of how out of whack, as we call it, or how off in terms of the equal population that's required to be for each district that the current districts are currently under. The next step in the process would really be engaging with the commission and the city in terms of your public educational workshops and educating the public on the redistricting process and how they can participate in that process, and then also finalizing and delivering the final data sets that would be used for the redistricting process. This would not only include the population data sets, that come by census block and census block group and census tract, but also any geographic data sets that the city wants to use. Certainly the city of Roseville has very defined neighborhoods that have been built up over time. As I said earlier, neighborhoods like the Sun City neighborhood. And so ensuring that all of those geographic data sets were available to the commission as well as you go through this process of deliberating towards a final map. As you get into the 2022, and certainly once again, this timeline can be accelerated. We get into public input hearings, evaluating draft maps that the public submitted, and then at the appropriate time, a commission approval of a draft map and a technical report, which once again has to be published 7 days in advance of the commission approval of that draft map, but making sure that draft map is out there and publicly circulated prior to that February 1st deadline that was described earlier in your meeting. Then once again, you go into the public input hearings on that draft map, and that's usually when the public is most involved in this process. And then after that, final commission approval of a final map, and once again, the technical report, the data and statistics to support that map. And then lastly, once the commission's process is completed, really working with the city clerk and city staff to ensure that the Placer County Registrar of Voters has all the information and the geographic sets that they need so that they can re-precinct the Brownies prior to the city's next election. Next slide, please. Well, before I continue with this, once again, in terms of that February 1st deadline, I would say that a couple things. One, certainly it wasn't clear in the RFP that was a final deadline. And based on the city clerk's description earlier, I certainly understand why it would be important to get it in place, get a map in place before those campaign finance rules kick in. And once again, in the RFP, it did say it was a tentative schedule. But as I described before, whether you look at the Gantt chart that's in our RFP or the process that I just described, certainly we are able and willing to meet that February 1st accelerated deadline. As I think was pointed out earlier in the meeting, state law under the California Fair Maps Act does have an April 17th, 2022 deadline, so certainly the commission's work would need to be completed by then. But once again, in order to ensure that the city's campaign finance rules are working effectively, certainly we're able to meet that February 1st deadline. Now, with respect to this slide and the cost proposal, the overall cost for the demographer technical and mapping consulting, that's really Mr. Ely and my work with respect to working with the commission, is $35,000. And then both of us are based in Southern California. I live in the city of Los Angeles, and Mr. Ely lives in the city of San Gabriel and the San Gabriel Valley. And so there's also an additional cost of travel expenses of $2,000. Those costs are all inclusive. And so that means regardless of the amount of work that Mr. Ely and I would do with respect to the scope of work that was in the RFP, this will be our total cost. I can't speak for our competitors and what they may have proposed with respect to their costs, but what I will say with respect to ours is not only are we experts in this and we move very quickly, we also have very little overhead. We're single member LLCs and working out of our homes. We don't have office space that we have to provide. We don't have other staff that we pay for. And so that's really why our cost is as low as it is. And I would imagine it's extremely competitive with respect to the consultants that you're considering this evening. In terms of optional services, there are some options that are available. Some jurisdictions want to have a user-friendly mapping digital interface tool, which would be available on the Commission's website and allow people to draw and submit maps electronically. And so if that's something that the Commission was interested in, that would be an additional $5,000. As I described before, we can also provide a full-service outreach services to the community, and that would be approximately $15,000 to $20,000 if that was so desired by the Commission. And then also some jurisdictions want their consultant to entirely develop and maintain the website that a commission or a city or jurisdiction would use. And so if that's something that the Commission wanted to do as well, that would also be an additional $5,000. And then on the bottom of the page, you can see our hourly rates, just to give you an idea of the amount of time or what it would cost per hour for us to do this work. But once again, as I described, with respect to the scope of work that's before you and that was described in the RFP, that total cost is $37,000. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd be happy to turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, with any respect to any questions or answers for us, and be happy to answer any questions that the Commission has.
Thank you, Mr. Westall. Would anybody like to begin with a question?
When you talk about the full service outreach services, it goes up to $15,000 to $20,000. Is that the services of I'm going to say his name wrong, Tisco?
Yes, Tisco.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, and really what those services are, it would mean that us as consultants would actually put together the public workshops, put together all of the public input hearings for the commission, and so it's and then doing the outreach to the community. And so it's not only setting up the meetings for the commission in lieu of city staff, but it's also doing the outreach to the various neighborhoods and various communities and community organizations in the city. And so it's really a full service approach. And it really depends if that's something that the commission desires. Some commissions or jurisdictions would have city staff do that, but we're available to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners?
I've got a question. So I noticed on page 22, so your tab D, you mentioned that the firm has the ability to purchase commercially available databases if requested and reimbursed. And I was just curious, what additional databases would we want to purchase? What would the cost be? And, if you could just kind of walk us through that a little bit, that would be great.
Sure. No, that's a great question, Commissioner. Certainly it's something that's unusual and not necessarily done for the most part. I would imagine that the city of Roseville has a rather robust GIS system, as well as, as described in the proposal, you would have access to the census data, the ACS data, and elections data. Sometimes, a jurisdiction, well, let me give you an example. So there's a nonprofit organization that I'm doing some consulting work with that's looking at state legislative redistricting with respect to the African-American communities in the state of California. And so with respect to that, it's very difficult to pinpoint African-American voter registration in the state of California because unlike, say, Filipino registration, Latino registration, Japanese registration, you can use ethnic surname dictionaries, and that's really what the statewide database uses with respect to providing those data sets that are available to you and would be available to this commission once that data is put together. But sometimes you want to go out and look at magazine subscriptions. You want to look at other types of commercial databases that are collected so that you can really target a particular ethnic population in particular with respect to the data that you're looking at and making sure that you're treating them fairly under both the California and the Federal Voting Rights Act. It's not something I really anticipate with respect to the city of Roseville, but certainly if we're brought under contract and that's something that the commission wanted to entertain, we'd be happy to have those discussions and see if there is anything available to you that would be of interest.
Thank you. That was helpful. I just didn't know what we would possibly want, so good to know.
Questions? Jefferson?
Yeah. Good evening. You have a tremendous number of meetings called out in your scope of work. The RFP looks like it called for 5 meetings, and there are other meetings that I'm seeing outside of the public hearings, public input hearings, and others that seem to exceed the 5. I'm wondering if they're included in the bid.
Yes, Commissioner, they are included in the bid. The 5 meetings that are highlighted are what I consider the main business meetings of the commission, meaning that that's when you're taking particular action or having particular presentations in front of the commission. Certainly with respect to public workshops, which may or may not be a full commission meeting, or those communities of interest public input hearings that you would have prior to a draft map or after a draft map are all inclusive as well. There's just not as much interaction that we do as consultants with respect to that. I would say, well, the public workshops certainly, but with respect to those public input hearings, as community of interest hearings, there's not a whole lot that the consultant would do other than attend and listen and collect that data.
Thank you.
Sure.
In terms of paper maps or non-online options, can you just walk us through those options and any additional cost for any kits that we have to have? Is that something that's mentioned in another one?
Yeah, so there's no additional cost, and certainly, as we're coming out of the pandemic, you can imagine that we'll be doing a lot of these a lot of these meetings in person. And certainly we provide paper maps, usually Google satellite maps or other types of maps that can be used with the redistricting software that provide landmarks in the city. And those maps are very useful, particularly in communities where you don't have a lot of usage of the internet, and certainly where you have elderly populations that aren't as familiar with computers and online mapping and that sort of thing. And so as we go into these public workshops and the communities of interest public hearings, we would provide those maps to the public, and so that they can draw and really describe their communities not only to the commission but also to us as consultants, so that we can understand and once again collect that data and aggregate it for the commission as you continue through your deliberations. And so certainly paper maps are something that's extremely useful and certainly used throughout this process. An online mapping tool is something else that is available, but not every jurisdiction frankly wants to incur the cost or feels the need to go that way. And we've gotten a long way from Thomas Brother maps, but certainly it's the same idea.
What online mapping tools do you use?
So there's a website or a firm called District Builder, right? And you can look it up. It's called districtbuilder.com is the main vendor that we use with respect to an online mapping tool. And it's a very user-friendly tool that basically not only allows you to be able to build the city and by those neighborhoods as we described before, in census block by census block or by census block group or by tract, but it also allows you to enter in a description of your community input. And so it's not just a mapping tool, but it's also a collection of a description of your community as well, if that's something that a user wants to use.
So would that be used in concert with, or is it the same product as Maptitude?
No, so the Maptitude software is something that is really the software that the consultant uses. It's not really a user-friendly software, and it's not really something that someone who is not very versed in GIS would use. And so certainly it would take quite a bit to be able to teach someone in the public to be able to use that. They do have an online tool which is more user-friendly, not great, but more user-friendly. But that costs us $15,000, and so certainly there are some other platforms that are available out there that are much cheaper and much more user-friendly, like District Builder. And to be clear to your question, Commissioner, all of that information that's collected on that District Builder website, we can export out. It's been given to us, and we export out, and then we can import it into Maptitude and be able to provide the various maps and various analysis that the Commission would require.
Thank you.
I have an experience question. There's qualifications of the team. It goes for tab C. It goes for a couple of pages. I mean, it just talks about the individuals that are on your project team and their experience. And then on page 18, there's another little. It almost looks like a subsection, but it's not divided out. Where it says our municipal redistricting clients include the following: City of Long Beach, Danville, San Ramon Services District, Vacaville, Brentwood, Concord. And my question is that those projects, were they done by Bear with your existing subcontractors?
So that's a great question, Commissioner, and so let me clarify it for you. So under each of myself and the subcontractors, there are various projects. Those projects that you just described are not projects that I have worked on personally or that other members of the team have worked on, other than Olson Remcho, the legal firm that I talked about earlier. To answer your question fully with respect to our current redistricting clients, our current clients are the Los Angeles Unified School District, the City of Los Angeles, the city of Alhambra, which is located in Los Angeles County, as well as the Chino Basin Water Conservation District, which is in western San Bernardino County. And then, as I talked about earlier, I do some consulting work for a nonprofit, and that nonprofit is called the Equal Representation Project. And so those are our current clients with respect to redistricting.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions. Go ahead now.
Next.
We'll go and move on to our next presenter. Thank you, Mr. Westall.
Thank you, commissioners, and good luck.
So our next presenter should be Flow Analytics, Jed Roberts.
Better graphic designer.
Good evening.
If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and begin your presentation. Can you hear us? Brian, I'm not sure if you can hear us.
I think I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and begin your presentation.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the Commission for having me tonight. My name is Jed Roberts. I'm a senior GIS analyst with Flow Analytics, and I am based out of Portland. I am a project manager as well, with over a decade of experience in the public sector and another 2 years with Flow Analytics. I manage several of our higher profile school district and electoral redistricting projects, including Portland Public Schools, County of San Diego, and Spokane County, Washington, as redistricting. Both of those last two are redistricting projects. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Flow, our approach, and our differentiators here, just to keep us on time here with the short time that we have together. So Flow is a GIS and data analytics planning firm based in the Pacific Northwest. We primarily serve local governments and school districts nationally. We actually got into redistricting work as at a request by some of the school districts specifically that we'd been working with on enrollment balancing to help them with some of their board districting. We've completed over 90 redistricting and demographic analysis projects in the past 5 years. We take a very impartial, data-driven approach to our work, really focusing in lately on redistricting. It's been a big piece of work for us, where right now, as I mentioned, we're working with the County of San Diego and 3 other counties in California, as well as a few in Washington State. So I just wanted to highlight our differentiators before we get into questions here. So as you'll see in our proposal, we offer a baseline demographic assessment to provide census block level estimates of the 2020 year, so that the Commission can start to look at potential district scenarios ahead of the official census data. And that's really helpful when we know that we've got a pretty tight timeline to work with, and we know generally where we're going to see changes in population based on products that come out from the census, between census. And we got a couple other data products that we can look at too and talk with you about the pros and cons of looking at. So that's something, again, just given the tight timeline, our baseline demographic assessment is something that we do offer to get us going sooner. The second differentiator is our district scenario modeler. And that's designed to be easy to use for both the public and the Commission, but to also be flexible so we can incorporate different geographies like communities of interest or other relevant geographic areas. And this is a tool that we have developed in-house, although we use existing technologies like Tableau dashboards, if you're familiar with that, Esri, GIS, as well as Alteryx, which is a data workflow tool, to build something that is portable, flexible, and again, easy to use, as we've looked at quite a few of the other districting tools that are out there, and really wanted to focus on something that really just boiled down the most salient pieces of this process. The next differentiator is really our procedural approach, and that's really for us all about tracking each scenario and each public map that come through in digital form, so that we're able to meet all of the public records requirements of a process like this. And so I wanted to speak to an example of, as we get into the public engagement, public hearings, we'll be able to take written maps, and our staff will then be able to digitize those, whether they be communities of interest or actual scenarios for districts, and then load it into our system to be able to, again, track that, to look at all of the different options that have been considered throughout this process. And then, of course, compile that for the commission to take a look at, in addition to scenarios that the commission comes up with as well. I also want to highlight as a differentiator that our community engagement team is a strong team that is with our company, Flow Analytics. They are going to support the public engagement efforts. They will work with the county staff to develop collateral if we're trying to get folks out to the hearings. We'll as well develop the materials that will be spoken to at the different hearings, as well as different kind of media buys, whatever it may be, that falls within that community engagement plan that you see highlighted in our proposal. And then finally, a deep bench of 20 GIS professionals that allows us to support all of our redistricting projects. You heard that, yes, there's a lot of that work and a lot of busy demographers out there right now. We've got a strong and large team that allows us to be able to support the clients that you've heard me mention already. And I did want to also mention that Flow Analytics comes to this proposal alongside another two entities that we identified, again, as we we're thinking through entering this, and we reached out to Redistricting Partners, who we know have a very strong track record in California, and they would be offering the training portion of this budget that you see here of the statement of work. And then we have an optional task to work with Rene Public Law Group, again, based in California, that would serve as a complement to the county's legal counsel, should that be needed. But I think that what you'll find with quite a bit of the training that's provided by Redistricting Partners, you're going to learn a lot through this process. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions about our proposal. I'm happy to field those. And again, thank you for the opportunity to share with you here tonight.
Thank you, Jed. Who'd like to go first with the question?
I'll ask one clarifying one. Did I understand correctly, then our training would be outsourced? It would not be done necessarily by you?
It would be done by our partner firm, Redistricting Partners, who are based out of Sacramento.
Thank you. One more question. For the public hearings, how many are you including in that price?
Yeah, so in our reading of the proposal, we had included 2 meetings in each of the districts. And the approach there is a pre-map meeting that really focuses in on some education pieces, what we're seeing in our baseline demographic assessment as far as population changes, and just sort of the rules of the road for this process, and an opportunity to get to know what the commission's going to be doing. And then a second post-map meeting once we are looking at viable options once the commission's looking at viable options that they want to share in each of those districts.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
In a few different spots in the proposal, you mentioned that pricing is open to negotiation and these things can be adjusted. I will say one of my concerns right now is the pricing for flow analytics compared to a couple of the others. And so I know that you guys are including more meetings, and I would just love to hear, when you put in, that things are negotiable or things can be adjusted. I'd love to hear where you think are some areas that the budget can be trimmed, but the community engagement still maintained very strongly. Because I do think it's important for us to invest in that community engagement. Just want to understand maybe where you were hinting that there are opportunities to adjust.
Right. Well, that's a big area. Where we do see our clients wanting to adjust. Sometimes they want us to do more, sometimes less. And that really depends on the jurisdiction's capacity to support that already. They may already have public engagement consultants or internal staff that are ready to do most of that work. So that's an area specifically where we're able to, if we need to, roll back costs there. But it can be also across the board with respect to the technical aspects as well. There may be data available from our clients that are able to scale back some of our level of effort. I mean, it really is a conversation that we have during the contract negotiation or at the project kickoff, just to make sure that everything within the proposal is meeting the need. That's why we always include that language in there, because until we've had a detailed discussion with the client, we don't want to lock ourselves into what we've talked about with the response to a request for proposals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's helpful because if we were just giving points on that based on the final price, we might not give you enough credit in that space. So I appreciate the transparency that that's all based on the planning conversation.
Any other questions for Jed? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Presentation.
Have a lovely evening, and I wish you luck in your selection.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open it up to public comment on the presentations. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on the presentations? See none, we'll go to commissioner discussion.
Before we move on to that, can we just double check and make sure that there's nobody that wants to call in and comment publicly at 916-774-5353? Anybody'd like to call in?
All right, seeing there's no calls, we'll open up to commissioner discussion. I'd like to kind of alternate every once in a while, just moving down the aisle and then moving back over, giving everyone a fair opportunity to go first or go last. Renee, would you like to start us off with any thoughts about the presentations?
I really wish we could have seen the first guy. And if he had a presentation, see his presentation. I think just verbally being able to hear him didn't have the same impact for me as the other two.
Jefferson?
I'm intrigued by the value that the number of meetings that some of the vendors are proposing versus others could be of tremendous value to the public. Does that warrant the cost delta that they've responded with or not? I think that's game for discussion. But and the tool set is interesting to me. They have very complex tools, very high powered. S3 GIS is ArcGIS is a great mapping tool. But it doesn't sound to me like any of us are going to get access to that powerful product. The custom product that that Flo has built sounds, but I don't know if it would be easier or easiest for us to use. It's hard to tell until you get your hands on it.
Jefferson, have you had experience with Esri before?
I worked with Fish and Wildlife, and they map everything. Wildlands, wetlands, bird populations, just everything. So they're tremendous minds in that particular organization. I was not particularly one of them, but yes, had some access to a very powerful tool.
All right, Ryan?
Yeah, just sort of spinning off of what Renee said, I do feel like Dr. Johnson was a little bit handcuffed. I don't know if that was on our side or his or how that all came about, but it is what it is. But I feel like he overcome that as best he could, I guess. Julie had some good questions, and he was able to respond to all of those. I feel like there's this one section, their proposal about their approach to public engagement, and they talk about these 3 E's: engage, educate, empower. That kind of resonated with me. I feel like they're competitive on price. Sometimes the devil you know, kind of a thing. They've worked with the city before recently. So I'm kind of getting a good vibe from them.
Andrew?
Yeah, it seems clear that National Demographics has tons of experience. But the one most recent for the city of Roseville seems to be a bit controversial in my mind. I mean, I don't know that they handled it the best. And that's a little concerning. Price-wise, seems to be great, but the other two don't have the experience that National Demographics does. So I'm a little bit torn between the experience, good or bad, versus not having enough experience. And since this is a kind of a new process for the city, I think it matters. Maybe more than the cost part does. Because the price-wise, they're within the ballpark of each other, so that's how I feel.
Kevin, what are your thoughts?
So is Bear providing training for us? It wasn't clear to me from that proposal. It is in there. Seems like a very low cost, something that the city could get away with if we all put our minds to it. But on the other hand, I like something like Flow where I don't have to work hard at all. None of us do. So I'm of 2 minds, and I just thought I'd throw that out there for now. So.
You finished?
I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like a little bit, when you look at these things, it's sort of, you're comparing apples and oranges a little, so it is difficult. And I too was sort of interested in the public-facing aspect of it. Like I'm not really clear why that should be such a big piece of it, because is it pretty much virtual, or do we have to have these things all around all the districts? That was mentioned at one point by one of them. But this doesn't seem to be to me, maybe a real controversial type of a commission where there would be a lot of public input or outcry if it didn't go exactly the way someone wanted, other than a actual elected person. So I'm not sure. Is there a lot? You've been on other commissions before. Do you get a lot of public input?
I mean, sorry, you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
There are some things that happen, in my opinion, every 5 years or so we'll do a larger, how should we spend the budget money and, get more people there.
Right.
But Yeah, I don't know. When we go out there, you can go to the
I mean,
Miami Center or wherever we're
do
going to go.
do we have to have 5 meetings, or, I
What is it-
mean,
what
is
is it
there,
in the-
there's milestones?
The redistricting ordinance requires 5 public hearings, 1 in each existing council district.
Oh, so they geographically have to be spread around as well?
Correct.
They can't be virtual.
Okay, interesting.
Our thought is no. They need to be where public can provide testimony and look at the maps that are proposed by the Redistricting Commission in order to determine, the most popular map that you all could then say, this is our map. I would then publish that map with the plan, and within 30 days, then we'd have those 5 public hearings. So the timeline gets really condensed once maps are identified for potential.
Okay, so it seems like, looking at these bids, that wasn't clear to them. They were thinking, we're having 5 meetings, every month there's 1 meeting, public meeting.
I got the indication that they understood that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's me.
And then we also have the meetings that we have,
Right.
and they would be coming to
Some, yeah. They probably come, one exclusively for just outlining the training. Of course, they'd be talking about the Senate bill, the Fair Maps Act, and then we also incorporated our own redistricting requirements within the ordinance. Ours are more restrictive than just the state Fair Maps Act. So there's a whole other component of training that the city implemented or the voters implemented that go on top of that Fair Maps Act.
Brian?
Yeah, when I first looked at these, I was a little surprised by just how much higher flow was than everyone else. I think Julie did a good job of asking a question and helped close that gap for me to some degree. In my mind, it seemed like they have some stronger attributes that we might, be able to glean from. Whether or not it's an additional $25,000 to $30,000, I'm not sure. I liked, and I wish, going on what Renee said, I wish Dr. Johnson was able to actually be live with us, or not live, but visible. I'm torn between, is it a good idea to use the same demographer that we used the last time or not? I think there are a lot of advantages to using them because they have a pretty good handle on the city, and that could be helpful. But I remember there being a lot of concern about the maps that were out there. And what I don't know is how much of that was their influence versus just people being sort of up in arms about how the lines would be drawn specific to them, okay? And I don't know how much of that the council had, and I'm assuming that the council really didn't have the ability to sway them one way or another. And if they did, if they had a lot of interaction with them, that could be a concern for me as well, because they can carry that over into this next process. So that's the one concern I have for national demographics.
Chair, may I respond to that?
Yes.
NDC merely facilitated the process.
Okay.
They didn't recommend maps. They drew various maps. They took community output on those maps. Ultimately, it was the political body that chose the map. It wasn't NDC who chose the map.
Okay, thank you. That helps quite a bit. Yes, thanks.
Holly?
Yeah. I kind of went into this when I was first looking at the bids going like, I was kind of disappointed with NDC based on the last time they did it, right? When the city council chose what the map was going to be. So because we're like an independent commission, like we get to decide what it's going to be. So I lean towards the experience of NDC because of that and because of the way that they answered Julia's questions. I think it was what I wanted to hear in terms of fairness, and so kind of that's where I'm at right now. I did like flow was the only one in their proposal that had put the correct date as the end date. Everybody else was off by 3 months, and I know that there, inside of the actual RFP itself, there was a tentative schedule, and it said tentative schedule at the top, but at the beginning of the background material, it said the deadline for the thing to be done is February 1st. So they had my heart at the beginning with that part, like getting the date right, because it does matter. Like, we're not just like a number.
Which
like
proposal was that?
That was the Flow. Flow got it right. So. Sorry.
I'm like Brian. I found Flow very appealing. One of the things that impressed me about their written proposal was just how specific. These are the people who are going to be working here. This is what this particular person is going to be, and this is what our process is. And I really like the fact that they got it very concrete and detailed about it. I was a little off-put by NDC's written proposal because it seemed like it was an awful lot of, hi, we're really qualified and we're really experienced, and that's why you should go for us, without a lot of concrete detail. Having said that, I'm really concerned about Flow's pricing too. You know, that's daunting a little bit, but I like the level of detail that they went into. And I find it really hard to compare, what you're getting from each one of them, for the money that you're getting is like Sonia said, it's difficult to price out, and I wasn't entirely comforted by Dr. Johnson's response that, well, we like to keep it flexible depending on how many meetings people want to have, because that makes it really difficult for us to price it out.
Julia, what are your thoughts?
I would echo a lot of what everyone has said so far. I did think that the RFP, similar to what you were saying, there was a lot of, we're really great. I, in particular, there was one quote included where it said, here's a great expert, ... Today you bring him here for what sounds like good information. Very smart man up here. And that was the quote. And I just found that didn't tell me much. And then there was a great question about the references, whereas I liked in the other sections, they told us what the reference experience was. And so when looking at the experience section, I felt there was more meat to the actual response for the other two. I felt NDC was focusing more on a quantitative approach. Let's throw 368 names at them, as opposed to get into the crux of it all. And I think when I asked how many of them have been done since everything changed, because that felt like it was his defense of, as a community member, the question of how many public comments are we going to get? How active will people be? Me on this commission, that is exactly a result of being, frustrated by the previous districting process. And we have seen the results of it in our neighborhood association. We just had new flashing yellow lights installed on Junction, and we've had 2 council members come and talk to our neighborhood association, but neither mentioned this big change because they're based in other areas. And so our biggest concerns before are happening. And so that's why I do think this is really important and why I was asking very critical questions for NDC. So for me, the experience, I do think the best experience was Flow. I love that they have a team of 20 data people just ready to tackle it, because to me, that's how you can trim cost, efficiency. When you've got a big team and you can do things a bit quicker, it's going to save you money as opposed to the one-man team. So I really liked Flow. In particular, the things I liked about Flow was their emphasis on growth. They were the only RFP response to talk about how they have experience working with high growth areas and we know Roseville is growing rapidly. So I appreciated that they specifically were talking about those. And I know people talked about how their response was the most specific. And sometimes it's better to invest on the front end, and we can haggle a bit and talk about our project plan. But I do think it's going to save us on the legal side of defending a bad map if it comes to that. So that's where I stand.
All right. Before I make any comments, yes. Yeah,
Can
the
we take some
alternates?
comments from, alternates
And then
also?
also, there is a phone call from the public, and so even though we did public comment earlier, I won't make a habit of it, but I'd like to, at least this time, let them come on in. So, Christine, if you'd like to start off.
This is awkward. I don't know whether to face you or talk into the microphone. I'll do my best here.
We can see your face from the screen.
So I think one of my main concerns is the optics with National Demographics Corporation. And while we were uncertain as to where that decision came from, I think the public has a really strong, it's possible the public has a really strong opinion that they would associate a map they weren't really happy with coming and being a product of this organization. And so it's not that you couldn't do damage control on it, but I feel like there would have to be an aspect of doing that just to, I guess, reestablish public trust. I also liked with National Demographics Corporation, the engage, educate, and empower. However, it sounded to me like the empower was an optional thing that would cost you a little bit extra if you actually wanted to empower them. And then the third question I had is, as far as public engagement outreaches, I know that Roseville, last time did we lean heavily into the city to provide a lot of that?
Correct.
I mean, everything from like flash vote to the newsletters and all of that. And is the expectation we would do that again?
Yes.
That we wouldn't necessarily lean into any of them?
Well, and then necessary that we would probably go to each neighborhood association individually
Okay.
with the message, in which that did not occur last time.
Okay. So we've learned a few things. Yes. And that's good. I liked with Flow, I felt like they generally had an excellent plan. I liked the fact that they were somewhat negotiable, that we actually could come back and say, that's great, we don't need that many meetings, but what we do need is this. And so I do like the willingness to look at the numbers with that. I think those were my high points.
Thank you. John, what are your thoughts?
I don't have a whole lot to add about NDC or FAIR, but one thing I did want to say about flow analytics, because it kind of confused me and maybe I misunderstood, but the public engagement and outreach services on the summary says it wasn't included in the RFP, but I thought he said they were planning on 2 meetings in each district. Is that correct? So with that being included in their price, kind of surprised me. I was glad it was there, but what seems out of whack is this 31,000 or 33,000 for 5 meetings that they have here, out of whack compared to the competition. So if they're open to negotiation, it seems like that would be something we could ask, why it's $6,000 a meeting for you to come to one versus, competition's $2,000 or whatever. It seems like that's where a lot of this $101,000 is.
And I think they actually budgeted for 10 meetings.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, 2 in each district, so.
We probably only.
Okay, so that's what, these aren't our meetings that it's $30,000. Like maybe I misunderstood, the public meetings are the district meetings, or are they separate?
We have our individual meetings here as a commission. We will also have public hearings, and the public hearings are required by the Fair Maps Act and our redistricting. In order to meet that criteria, we have to have 5 public hearings, 1 in each district.
Okay.
Our regular meetings, they could attend, but until we get the census data, I don't know what kind of public outreach they do prior to that. I think the public outreach needs to make the community aware that we're having 5 public hearings. Here's our draft map. Here's our plan. Do we move forward with that?
but the 5 public hearings are not the district meetings.
Yes, they are.
Okay, then that's what I misunderstood. Okay, so the 2 meetings in each district is the 10 meetings, it's 31,000. Got it, okay, I misunderstood.
It could be 1 meeting per district.
Yes,
You could half it.
Yeah, okay.
which would be
Which
15,000.
would then have 15 instead of 30.
So they're 85.
So we could ask them to price it per meeting then, instead of as this flat 30,000.
Because if you look at the proposal, it talks about the number of public hearings, and then it adds travel on there as well.
Yeah.
So that was confusing to me.
Charles?
Well, I think one I'd just like to point out is that Flow, even though Flow did, they specifically said that their fee and scope is up to negotiation, it's pretty common that for RFP processes that if you select somebody and there's something that's not quite with the scope or the budget, that there's always room for a little bit of negotiation with any, I would assume, with any of the 3. So I kind of think that that's probably on the table for all of them. I think the one thing that I was really surprised at on Flow was with Renee's question about when he said in the presentation that they themselves don't do the training, that they sub that out. I thought there was a little disconnect there, that we're going to be getting training by a different company than the people that we're going to be doing most of the work with. So that was the one thing that struck me as a little odd.
All right, should we go to the public comment that's on the phone?
Good evening. If you'd state your name, you may make your comments now.
Yes, my name is Lamills Garrett, and thank you for allowing me to make a public comment. I was listening earlier, and I must have missed when it opened up, so I apologize for the interruption. Based on the presentations, I guess I'll jump to that. I strongly encourage, from the public's point of view, to avoid any distraction, controversy, or feel from the community that we are competing using a vendor that was involved with what many would consider to be a gerrymandered situation that we're in today. And that would be NDC, whether they received political advice from city council members or otherwise. There's a clear public concern, caution, fear that any map that's associated with them again would be tainted. And so that in itself, I encourage you to think long about the possibility of considering them, and more so, please don't, so that the public would at least have trust in the actions of this independent commission. I'll also note that I was one of 3 members that was on the Charter Review Commission, along with staff that met multiple times to form the very language that we have here. Earlier it was mentioned, I think, with NDC, that incumbency is something to be considered, or could be considered. Based on the language, just so you know, in the Redistricting Commission, incumbency cannot be included within this. So incumbency is something that you cannot consider where current political office holders are today in terms of building out the map. That is one of the additional components we have on top of the Fair Map Act. Additionally, you're also going to find that there's additional work being done around boundaries that have been done. And because of the additional restrictions on boundaries, specifically highways and rail yards are called out in the Redistricting Commission. That was language I specifically put in recommended in conjunction with the other members. It sounds like the data analysis work that Flow does would fit more with being able to run through scenarios of validating rail yards, highways, bridges, etc., as components of where people live and where people don't live, as a part of the restrictions that are currently in the language for the Redistricting Commission as well. Lastly, thank all of you for volunteering to be on this Redistricting Commission when we were imagining it and coming up with the language for it. There was a major concern whether or not we would be able to populate it. So for each of you sitting there, thank you for raising your hands, going through the process, and selecting each other, which was all built in and put in the plan. And so thank you for your service. That's all I have. Goodbye.
Thank you.
And there's no other calls, correct? Okay. So in terms of my own thoughts, I think just everything that you've all already said kind of ran through my mind as well. Personally, I don't feel that Bear is experienced enough to do it. I was worried about the very low cost of their mapping tool. I like that Flow does use Esri, and getting Jefferson's feedback on that as well, I think helps in making that decision. I was a little bit concerned with the kind of decentralization of Flow, but in terms of the training that they've contracted out, you are kind of getting a rock star in terms of redistricting in the person that they'd be contracting with. And so I wouldn't worry too much about that. He's not in-house. And then the same concerns that everybody's raised about national demographics. Again, very qualified price-wise, but that perception, I think, is going to be tough to overcome. So having said that, unless there's any other questions for staff, can you go through with us, again, the process?
I do have a question, sure. Mr. Chair. It's for council. Don't touch the microphone. In our procurement modeling, do we, once we accept a response, is it in fact, it becomes part of the contract? I'm speaking specifically to our ability to negotiate down. Typically, these things are accepted at the level at which they are proposed. Could you give me some feedback on whether or not the response itself becomes part of the contract with the vendor? If there is additional negotiation that can or needs to happen, do we need to involve all participants in terms of a level playing field, give them the opportunity to negotiate themselves into a better position as well?
The way that the process will work from here is whatever demographer is recommended, I'm going to work with them to create a contract. They have a copy of the contract, and so they've already sort of, commented on it. And then that contract would be presented to City Council. Based on what the proposals are now, we put out our RFP, we received proposals, we've asked a whole bunch of questions, and we're looking to move forward with a demographer. So in order to sort of, I realize it's difficult right here to compare apples to apples, but if we have one that's, saying, I'm going to charge this much for 10 meetings, but we really only need to have 5 meetings, I mean, certainly a revision of the proposal to more to better clarify what the meeting schedule is and what the costs are going to be, I think would be correct. I think that's going to bring costs down for some of them. Overall, though, when we're looking at the selection process and sort of how we're weighting all this, as you look at the numbers and the maximum points, cost is a small portion of this. And so I don't want it to be your sole factor in deciding this, because it really is like a 1/5 factor into the whole thing. I want, us to look and make sure that we're comfortable with the experience and qualifications and the understanding of the project that they also have. All that being said, if a recommendation is made for one that we would also like to, recommend going with company A with an understanding that they will, whatever that may be, get it to 5 meetings or understand a budget for something like that. We're not going to come back together and all meet again to talk about it. I mean, right now we're making a selection of a demographer to go forward and go to City Council. So in the event that the proposers cannot change up or lower or do anything like that, we would have a problem and sort of kind of need to move on to the next recommended one. But we're sort of making our selection now based on the proposals and proposals received, questions we've asked tonight. Certainly there are clarifying questions, but that's once we get a final contract going forward, that may be a different number than what's in here. Yes, that is correct.
Sure. And there was an appropriation or a budgeted amount by the City Council for this product. Is the contract going to be written not to exceed?
Correct.
And it will be, and I don't know if everybody caught earlier that Sonia had said that council's allocated $150,000 budget for this, so, yeah.
Thank you.
But that does include meeting rentals, AV service. So I'd err on the side of not bumping up to that budget amount.
And then again, can you go over the process whereby we'll make the decision?
I would state that someone will make a motion for a particular demographer. If we receive a second, then we'd vote on that. If we didn't get a majority vote, we'd move on to a second motion.
Do I hear a motion for one of the demographers?
I move that we select Flow Analytics as our demographer.
I'll second that.
Roll call, or all in favor?
No, roll call.
Roll call.
Spending funds, you have to have a roll call. Commissioner Boravec?
Aye.
Commissioner Cuthbertson? Commissioner Frank?
Aye.
Commissioner Griffith? Commissioner Ludwig?
Aye.
Commissioner McPhail? Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Aye.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldrop?
Aye.
And Commissioner Willoughby.
Aye.
The motion passes.
All right. Well done, good conversation and getting to make a decision. So,
And to follow up on that, so now what will happen is I will follow up from the city attorney's office to finalize a contract with Flow, or, begin negotiations, hopefully get that proposal all squared away and move forward. And then that would be an item that would be agendized for a future city council meeting.
Future council meeting would be the last meeting, which is July 16th, I believe. And then the first meeting in August, which would be August 4th. One of those two meetings, depending on now how long the negotiations are going to take with Flow. So,
And we have another meeting of this commission at the end of July. So in the event that this goes to the August meeting, I'd be able to provide an update based on that.
our next meeting will be July 26th here at the chambers at 6 p.m. That'll cover some training as far as conflict of interest, meeting procedures, Brown Act, and depending on whether or not we get under contract, we'd like to bring the demographer in. We're going to skip the August meeting, bring the demographer in September for general training on criteria, what we need to look for, what rules we need to follow to start drafting the maps.
Do we have a tentative date for the September meeting?
It's, the meetings are always the fourth Monday of each month. Until we get to the public hearings, and those, well, we plan to hold in a week sequence, so travel should be reduced for some, but their hotel costs may be up if we keep them here a straight week for the public hearings.
Mary, you're looking on your phone for what day that is?
I'm just looking to see if I have the September date on my calendar yet.
Anyone have the 4th September?
You have calendars in front of you.
27th.
27th. Yeah.
27th. All right, that was the final item on the agenda. The next item is adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn to the July 26th meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion and a
Second.
second.
Third.
Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, good night. We'll see you on the 26th of July.
Thank you very much.